She called my cabin ugly on a Tuesday and proved it with a crowbar. I watched it live on my security feed at 7:02 a.m., coffee halfway to my mouth, while she pried off the cedar shutters I carved from my grandfather's old boathouse wood. Each hinge screaming as metal met wood, and she smiled at the camera like it was a stage emergency aesthetic violation, she said. Then tossed 100 years of family timber into a rented dumpster like yard waste. And if you've ever felt your chest go cold in one breath, you know exactly how that moment tastes. My name is Evan Cole. I'm 51, a widower, and before all this, I was an Army Corps engineer who built bridges in mud and heat and places that don't show up in travel guides. After Lena passed, I bought a slope of pines in High Ridge Basin, Montana, and I built something honest with my hands. Not a catalog box, a real cabin. With wildflower borders, humming in June. Solar on the roofed ain't capture barrels. I fussed over like a proud fool, a stone path. I set one knuckle at a time until the curve felt like the line Lena used to trace on maps. I wasn't trying to make a statement, I was trying to breathe. Then, Canyon Crest Preserve formed an HOA, and Deborah Langford gave herself a badge. The first envelope arrived with so many seals, it looked like a souvenir shop. Architectural nonconformity, visual disharmony, threat to property values. $500 and a corrective plan. In 30 days, I answered. My cabin predates the HOA by 9 months per recorded covenants. It's grandfathered. You know what I mean? Play it straight first. See if the grown-ups are actually grown-up as 2 weeks later. A thicker letter said, grandfathering doesn't apply to aesthetic disturbances. The fine jumped to $750, and now my wildflowers were non-compliant. Landscaping and my wind chimes were an auditory nuisance. I didn't shake. I just felt that quiet heat you get when a supervisor tries to break you with a trick you've seen before. So I turned on every camera I own and walked next door to see Walt Hargrove, 72, retired highway surveyor. Hands like split oak, owns a total station that could ping a fence post on the moon. And when Deborah sent her nephew Troy in a borrowed vest with a tape measure and gum snapping like a metronome, he declared I was 18 inches into the setback, and my stone path was unpermitted hardscape with a $2,000 emergency compliance fee. He even handed me an invoice, someone clearly made on a free website. Walt set up his tripod, tapped a few buttons, and read the numbers like scripture. "You're 4 feet inside the setback, Evan," he said, loud enough for the pines. "And I watched you lay that path before the HOA existed." Troy coughed something about alternate standards, scribbled angry homework on his clipboard. Peeled out it like that changed math. And that's when I knew this wasn't about rules. It was about control. The game kept changing. Deborah sent her brother-in-law, Kurt, an insurance adjuster, not an engineer, who poked my railing for 10 minutes, then called my place structurally dangerous and recommended $5,000 of immediate remediation by HOA-approved contractors. I didn't argue. I hired a real pro. Dr. Maya Trent, 40 years in structural. She climbed, tapped, measured, and wrote a report that read like a love letter to overbuilding exceeds code. In shear and load railings secure at 2x requirement. I made copies and stacked them in a folder labeled, "Such Friendly People." And just when you think you've seen the whole list, an emergency landscaping crew showed up to trim branches near power lines that were somehow only near my solar conduit. I watched them line up bolt cutters. Under my array, clear audio on the 4K feed. When the foreman told his guys, "Make it look like wind damage." Yeah, that happened. The police arrived before they finished the first cut. 2 workers got cuffed. The foreman's pocket held a cash receipt from Deborah. The twist came from a water-stained folder I found under a busted storage tote in my workshop. County records from the 80s that I wouldn't have known to ask for. Turns out Canyon Crest sits on a regraded municipal burn pit and ash dump that closed in 1986, capped and monitored the old way. Which means sometimes, not always. Most of the cap is thick and deep. The thinnest section sits at the lowest corner of the neighborhood on Deborah's side, exactly where she dug that luxury pool I called Nora Bell at the county, a clerk who does not play games. And she confirmed the site history. Pulled old maps, then said the one sentence that changes everything. If the cap was breached, we're not in HOA land anymore. We're in public health. Maya brought meters that chirp, probes that sniff, soil kits that change color, like mood rings with a law degree. We walked Deborah's fence line, and the air went sweet in the wrong way. Not cut grass. Sweet, chemical sweet that puts a coin taste on your tongue. Readings spiked for methane and volatile organics. Heavy metal markers in soil that should have stayed 20 feet down. Pool excavation likely punched the thin section. Maya said vapors find a path and keep coming. Groundwater can communicate through cuts like this. The county sent Inspector Luke Merritt, mom voice, tight clipboard. He photographed the pool right where the old map said the cap was thinnest and posted a yellow notice. Environmental monitoring required. Do not disturb the next morning. The cable was cut and the sign was gone, and Tom from the corner hardware had a demo camera pointed at that back corner, and the video showed Troy at 1:48 a.m. With a hoodie and wire cutters by supper. A federal environmental crimes agent named Victor Ramos stood in Deborah's driveway and explained, no raised voice, just hard facts. The tampering with monitoring equipment is a federal offense. She tried charm, then tears, then claimed the cable endangered birds. Victor's pen did not pause. That was the day the conversation flipped, when the law shifts from HOA bylaws to environmental protection. The priority list rearranges itself in the only order that matters. Air before lawn water, before paint color. People before pride. And the neighborhood noticed Walt's garage turned into a humming war room that smelled like coffee and motor oil and careful anger. 24 families told the same story in different shapes. Roses cited for being the wrong red. A tire swing labeled non-compliant play structure. A work truck in a driveway, ticketed like a broken hydrant. Angela Pruitt, our HOA attorney, looped in environmental counsel Janet Morales, and they handed us a 3-line plan document. Everything. Pull every public record and when you can prove risk. Use the statute that actually applies. We petitioned the county to designate a centralized waste collection and monitoring site at the lowest point of the contamination plume. You can guess whose property sits there. The law lets counties override HOA rules when public health is at stake, and it allows the owner whose illegal modification caused the breach to fund the fix, not a loophole. The point. Deborah went loud. A press conference on her driveway, while a warning sign blinked behind her, a private investigator who thought a baseball cap made him invisible. Late-night Facebook Lives in a gas mask while she shouted. There was nothing to worry about, and meanwhile, Agent Ramos brought a federal team with gear that doesn't blink. The readings got worse, methane pooling thresholds near vents, VOC spikes that would close a playground by lunchtime. The county fast-tracked a hearing word. Got around the community center, filled before the coffee urns. Finished sputtering lights. Tripods, parents with folded arms. A judge, who looked like he's seen every excuse twice. Maya went first, steady and clear. Maps, charts, numbers, that make sense to ordinary people here, here, and here. Safety thresholds exceeded depth breached ongoing emission risk. Angela and Janet followed one slide with the statute emergency authority. Supersedes private covenants. Walt spoke like Walt. No dressing, just truth. I measured, I watched. I've lived here long enough to know the difference between a flower and a problem. Deborah grabbed the aisle mic and called it a kangaroo court. Said my shack ruined property values, and this was revenge. The room went heavy, quiet. The kind where you feel your own breath. And I don't know why I stood up, but I did. Deborah, I said, you called my home ugly and tore it apart to make a point. You sent family with bad math and hired men to cut my power and pretend the wind did it. You loved rules until you wanted a pool. Then you dug into a cap. You didn't bother to learn about my cabin. Didn't poison our air. Your choices did explain to a buyer why a basement smells like a gas station. There isn't a perfect mic drop in real life. There's just the part where people hear it. The judge read the order. Effective immediately. Canyon Crest Circle becomes the Canyon Crest Environmental Collection and Monitoring Facility. The county contracts waste services for twice weekly pickup. Environmental engineers for continuous monitoring funding assessed to the responsible property until benchmarks are met in plain talk. The lowest lot becomes the drop site, and the person who broke the cap pays to keep everyone else safe. The next morning, the trucks came at dawn. Walt and I stood on his deck with paper cups of coffee that tasted like clean air and a long exhale. Diesel rumbled through the pines. Reflective vests moved like a choreographed crew. Industrial containers lined the driveway, where luxury SUVs used to idle. Sealed hazmat units for scheduled pickups. Tidy stations for organics and recycling. That looked better than some gas stations. I've seen it wasn't a punishment parade. It was infrastructure. With a heartbeat, household costs dropped. Because collections centralized, the federal team's monitors sent live beeps to a county dashboard and to an app I could open. If I wanted to lose sleep for fun, readings flattened in 6 months in a year. Our story showed up in a state newsletter about citizen-led environmental protection. We helped write an ordinance that forces environmental disclosure before anyone digs deeper than their sprinklers. Folks at the diner started calling it Lena's Rule because fairness wears her name well. And Deborah, she took a deal for tampering and the sabotage attempt. Probation fines. Cleanup duty banned from any HOA board in the county. I didn't cheer out loud. It's a strange thing to watch someone who craved control put on a neon vest and pick up trash. It teaches you how thin the wall is between the roles we play. Do I regret turning a mansion into a drop site? No, I regretted that it took poison in the air for people to remember what matters. My cabin still stands. Wildflowers. Still hum the shutter. Deborah ripped now hangs by my door. Sanded smooth. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. Some people won't believe a boundary exists until they hit it. Some won't believe danger exists until they smell it twice a week. The hydraulic whine drifts up the hill, and I think of Lena. She loved tidy endings. She loved fairness more, and if you've ever been told you were the problem because you didn't match somebody's picture of life, you know why I carved a small plaque that says, "Build it right. Then stand there." So tell me straight, did we go too far? Or was this the only way to keep families safe when the rules got twisted? Have you seen power used like a toy on your street by an HOA? A boss, a board. And what did it take to push back? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you've got a story. Where order was just a costume for control, I want to hear it. Hit subscribe. If you want more real fights and real wins, and if you think ugly can sometimes mean honest, you're my people.